They say love can build a home, but nobody tells you what happens when love builds a home without a foundation. In 200 level, love found Samuel and Ruth inside the well-known Federal University. They didn't plan to fall in love, but it happened. Samuel was tall, calm, and always talking about after-school life, even though he had not figured out during school life. Ruth was the kind of girl that trusted easily. Her parents were struggling, but they tried. Every semester, they made sure her school fees were paid in good time, and they also made sure she lacked nothing. And every year, her hostel rent was also paid. One day, Ruth quietly packed her bags and moved into Samuel's hostel. Not because her parents told her there was no money for rent anymore, or because marriage was discussed. When her parents sent the hostel rent into her account, she used it to cook for Samuel. To her, it was not stealing. It was a sacrifice. They lived like husband and wife, even though no wine was shared, no elder was consulted, and no bride price was mentioned. There is practically nothing legitimate couples do that these two do not do. In fact, they did more. Ruth learned to wash Samuel's clothes, iron his shirts, and serve food on her knees, calling him my husband when nobody was listening. 400 level came and went, and while others packed their bags to go home, Samuel and Ruth stayed back. Life after school welcomed them with open arms and empty pockets. As soon as Ruth became pregnant, it did not come as a shock. It came like a visitor everyone had been expecting. She gave birth, and the both of them took care of the baby. No Thanksgiving service because they had nothing, and no visit from Ruth's people. When her parents eventually heard that their daughter had given birth, they were hurt, but they kept quiet. In their wisdom, they said to themselves, the man who has heard our daughter should come and see us properly. But Samuel did not go. He kept on telling his borrowed wife, don't worry, we will figure it out very soon. He did small jobs here and there, just anything that could bring quick cash while we stayed home with the baby. Some days were good, while many days were not. But love has a strange way of deceiving people. They laughed a lot. They joked about their suffering, and hunger became something to laugh over. When there was no food, they drank garri together and promised themselves that one day they will laugh at the days from a better place. They were so poor, but they felt united. Ruth on her part never complained loudly. She believed suffering with a man was part of love. After all, has she not already given him everything? Her body, her youth, and her loyalty. Going back to her parents now felt like shame. And how would she explain the child and no bride price? Samuel, on the other hand, felt life owed him patience. He believed success would come suddenly with one big opportunity that would silence everybody. That belief made him relax where he should have been urgent. 1 year later, another child came because their bed was always busy. This time, Ruth was afraid. She sat Samuel down one evening and said, please, let's go and see my people. Just do the little you can. Pay my bride price. At this time, big ceremony is not what we need. Maybe doors will open for us after that. Samuel nodded. He always did. But tomorrow became next week, and next week became next year. Pride wrapped itself around him like confidence. He wanted to go to her parents as a big man, not as someone struggling. He didn't want pity. He wanted applause. Meanwhile, pressure was quietly building. Feeding became harder. Rain chased them like a debt collector that never slept, and Samuel started coming home angry, not because Ruth offended him, but because life was not bending to his plans. Small misunderstandings became arguments. Arguments became shouting. Shouting became insults, and before they knew it, neighbors started recognizing their voices. Still, Ruth held on. She believed love could fix everything. She didn't know that love alone is never enough when respect, responsibility, and timing are missing. Samuel became frustrated that each time Ruth mentioned her parents, he felt a tightening in his chest. Not because he hated them, but because he hated how small he felt in front of the thought of them. Going to her people meant explanations. It meant admitting that he had taken their daughter, lived with her, slept with her, and produced children without once showing his face. It meant kneeling before elders when his pockets were empty, so he postponed. Whenever Ruth brought it up again, he would say, "Not now. Let me first settle myself." And Ruth would nod, even though she didn't fully understand what settle meant anymore. She had already settled in his house, in his life, and in his struggle. By the time the second child arrived, the laughter that once filled the room had thinned. Bills replaced jokes, silence replaced long conversations, and hunger, which they once laughed about, now stared at them in the face like an enemy that had refused to leave. Ruth's days followed a painful pattern. She woke up early, tied the baby to her back, and searched for food. Sometimes she borrowed pepper and salt from neighbors, and she totally lost respect around that environment. She learned to stretch meals. One cup of rice would be for a full day, and then they would drink more water. Samuel noticed, but noticing and acting are not the same thing. He went out every day chasing work, returning most evenings with nothing but frustration. Each closed doors hardened him a little more, and each rejection added weight to his temper. Ruth began to ask for feeding money not as a wife but as a beggar, and very soon she graduated to an admiral style. When he wants to leave the house without dropping anything, she will stand in front of him, hold his trousers, and with a loud voice, she will remind him that it is his responsibility to take care of the children. Samuel hated that sight, not because she was wrong, but because it reminded him of his failure. And so, instead of confronting the situation, he confronted her. The first slap came unexpectedly. It landed on her cheek like a question she did not know how to answer. Ruth did not fight back. She stood there with one hand on her cheek in shock. Samuel apologized later. Of course he always did, but apologies that are not followed by change are only rehearsals for reputation. Soon, their fights became public entertainment. Neighbors gathered often, not because they enjoyed it, but because the noise demanded intervention. Voices clashed, insults flew, and accusations were thrown like stones. Useless man, ungrateful woman, see what you have done to my life. And before you know it, carrots, blows, and whatever style of fighting that you can think of will be in play. People shook their heads and walked away whispering. And yet, inside that same chaos, intimacy continued. It confused everyone. How can people who fight like this still sleep together? Neighbors asked. But fighting does not kill desire. Sometimes it fuels it. And so, despite the bruises, despite the insults, despite the tears and all of that, Ruth found herself pregnant again. When her belly began to show, people were shocked. They expected separation, not another child. Ruth herself was afraid. She knew something was wrong. Her body felt heavier this time. Her strength reduced quickly and the pregnancy was different. But she kept quiet because complaining has never helped her before. Someone noticed the pregnancy late, and when he did, fear sat on his chest. Another mouth, another responsibility, and another reminder. Feeding became a daily war. Sometimes Ruth chased Samuel down the street demanding for money. Sometimes he pushed her away, and sometimes in frustration he raised his hand again. Each blow erased a little more of what love used to be. But Ruth stayed. Where would she go? Her parents' house was no longer an option in her mind because she had crossed too many lines and she believed returning would only bring shame. So, she convinced herself that enduring was better than any other option. Months passed, her pregnancy advanced, her strength failed, and her face lost its glow. People whispered that she looked sick, but nobody truly stepped in. One night, labor pains started early, and Samuel had to beg a mobile neighbor to carry them to the hospital. And this time, so many things were going through his mind because he had not bought any item from the baby list that had been given to them by the matron. At the hospital, they checked roots, and the news came quietly but firmly. The baby was bruised, so she needed an emergency cesarean section. They asked for money, and everywhere became instantly blurry to Samuel because the last time he saw such an amount of money they mentioned was when he was still an undergraduate, and that was his school fees. He searched his pockets like a miracle will happen. He ran outside, made calls, begged friends who were also struggling, but he didn't receive any positive response. Ruth screamed again. Then again. She was growing weaker and weaker. The nurses grew anxious. The baby's life was at risk, so was hers, but they couldn't do anything until the money was paid. Samuel stood helplessly watching the woman who had given him everything slowly slip away. By the time help came, it was too late. Ruth gave up the ghost. The hospital room felt empty, even with her body still there. Samuel did not cry immediately. He stared. He shook her and he called her name. When reality finally hit him, it collapsed him. Death is supposed to end arguments, and it is supposed to silence quarrels and force peace. But in Samuel's case, death opened a door he never knew existed. Ruth, wake up, he whispered, his voice breaking. Just let the baby go alone. We have two already, and we all need you. But Ruth did not wake up. His legs finally gave way. He slid to the floor, sobbing like a child who had lost his mother. Nurses tried to lift him. People whispered. Some shook their heads. Others sighed and said, "It is well," but nothing was well. The news spread faster than sympathy, and before nightfall, calls started coming in, not from comforters but from messengers. This time, Ruth's people had heard. Samuel was sitting in his house contemplating on what to do when the first message came. You were not permitted to bury her. At first, he thought it was a joke, a cruel one at that. He called back thinking he would explain, beg or reason. The voice on the other end was too calm. You will marry her before you bury her. Samuel laughed bitterly. Marry who? He asked. A dead body? There was silence. Then the voice replied, slowly and clearly, as if speaking to a stubborn child. That dead body was our daughter. Fear crawled into Samuel's stomach, but pride still sat on his shoulders. I have never even met you people, we argued. How can you demand marriage now? When she was alive, nobody came. The response was sharp and final. When she was alive, you were enjoying her. If you want to see action, then just try it. And immediately he got out of the call. This was when Samuel knew that there was fire on the mountain. Ruth's body was moved to the morgue. Each day she stayed there felt heavier than the last. The cold room that preserved her body also preserved Samuel's guilt, and every time he signed a paper or spoke to a morgue attendant, it felt like another reminder that death had exposed everything he tried to hide. People began to whisper again. Some blamed Ruth. Some blamed Samuel and some blamed the both of them. But Ruth's people did not blame, they only demanded. A few days later, a man came to see Samuel. He was older, calm and spoke with authority. He listened quietly as Samuel complained and argued, pouring out everything: his poverty, his struggles, his anger, and his confusion. He was so angry that day that he said, "I will not go and marry her. I will simply bury her in the cemetery and nothing will happen. I don't have money, not to talk of wasting it on a dead body." When Samuel finished, the man sighed deeply and said, "My son, remember that your wife is from Eketu." The way he said it made Samuel uncomfortable. "If you like your life," the man continued, "go and meet her people and do exactly what they want." Samuel scoffed. "What can they do?" The man leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Oga, na Eket people you dey use play? People have tried what you were thinking in the time past. Some lost their minds, some lost their children, and some did not live long enough to tell the story." Samuel felt cold. This was no longer about culture alone, it was about fear. Real fear rooted in stories every Niger Delta child grows up hearing. Stories of consequences that followed disrespect. Stories of stubborn men who challenged tradition and paid with blood. That night, he did not sleep. He remembered Ruth begging him to go and see her people. He remembered postponing, laughing it off, and promising one day. He remembered every slap, every insult, every delay. And now, that one day had arrived, but Ruth was no longer alive to see it. 2 days later, Samuel traveled to her village. He didn't go alone because tension was still high. He traveled like a condemned man reporting himself to judgment. When he entered the compound, he knew immediately that mercy was not on the agenda. The elders sat quietly. Women stood at a distance, their faces hard, and no greeting was returned warmly. They went straight to the business of the day. The list was brought out, item by item, requirements by requirements, bride price, traditional rights, fines, compensation, and the amount was shocking. As the items were read out, Samuel's ears rang. I kid you not, the total amount was enough to establish 2 people comfortably if it was money he had. His mouth went dry. I don't have this, he said weakly. I can't even feed properly, and don't forget, your daughter Ruth left 2 children behind. One of the elders looked at him without blinking. That is not our business, so another added. In our place, it is important for you to note that we are not always in a hurry to bury our daughters, especially those with cases like this. Even if it takes you 5 years, the elder continued, we will wait. She will remain in that morgue. 5 years? Samuel asked. He imagined Ruth's body lying cold for years because of him. He imagined the shame, the whispers, and the cross of unfinished rites. He begged, he cried, he explained, but culture does not beg for tears. When he returned home, everything looked different. The house felt empty, not just because Ruth was gone, but because hope had left with her. His children cried at night, calling for their mother. He could not answer them. He could not even look at them without seeing her face. After weeks of struggling, he made the hardest decision of his life. He gave out his children to relatives. One went to his sister, another to a cousin. He told himself it was temporal, but deep down he knew nothing was temporal anymore. It was simply survival. Alone and broken, he started hustling. He slept hungry. He begged when necessary, and he saved every naira, counting money like a prisoner counting days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ruth, sometimes smiling, sometimes bleeding, and sometimes lying on that hospital bed. Finally, When the money was complete after 2 whole years, he returned to her village, not as a proud groom, but as a man emptied of himself. The rites were done. He married Ruth, then he buried her. Burial is supposed to bring closure. That is what people say. They say once the earth covers the body and the final prayer is said, the living can breathe again. They say grief fades with time and then life continues. But nobody tells you that sometimes burial is not the end of suffering. It is the beginning of a quieter and longer punishment. After Ruth was buried, Samuel returned back to base. That night, he slept for barely an hour. Each time he closed his eyes, the past returned without permission. He saw Ruth in labor, screaming his name. He saw her eyes searching for him in the hospital, and he heard her voice begging him to go and see her people. Just pay my bride price. He woke up sweating, gasping for air, clutching his chest like someone who had been running for his life. Money came, but it brought no relief. Bills still came, and hunger still not. The first thing he did was to visit the relatives who had taken his children, because he thought that was why he saw his late wife. He watched them from a distance, playing, laughing, and adjusting to new homes. His heart broke again, but he told himself this pain was necessary. He had made too many selfish choices in the past. This one had to be selfless. He walked away quickly before they noticed his tears. And from that day, he was intentional about rebuilding his life. Not for him this time, but for the children. He found work, real work, and the once angry man became too quiet. That was when he realized that we don't rush the seasons of life. If you enter one when it is not yet time, you will pay severely for it. Several years passed and people started pressuring him to get married again, but they didn't know what he knew. They did not know that every man's face reminded him of a debt already paid too late. They did not know that his heart associated love with consequences, and they did not also know that when he imagined marriage, he saw a morgue. Once, he tried taking a woman seriously. She was kind and patient, but each time they talked, he felt guilty because he believed strongly that if he had married Ruth rightly and waited till they were to an extent financially ready, she wouldn't have died. So he buried the intimacy with the new girl. We all know that children have a way of asking questions that adults are not ready to answer. Samuel's children began asking real questions anytime he visited. The older one asked first, "Daddy, when is mommy coming? Why are you always coming alone?" Samuel opened his mouth, but no words came out. He turned his face away quickly, pretending to adjust his slippers and pretending to be strong. How do you explain death to a child when you have not finished explaining it to yourself? He remembered how she used to sing while cooking, how she laughed even when food was small. Sincerely, Ruth was a good lady, if only they had done it the right way. He had no option than to stop visiting. He took care of them from afar. That decision alone made him broken the more. He told himself that he would tell them the whole truth when they become teenagers in order for them not to repeat the expensive mistake he and Ruth made. He thought it would take forever, but before long, the children were grown. Still, he wasn't ready. They were growing fast, taller, more thoughtful and more aware of the world. Conversations that once came easily were now measured. They asked fewer childish questions and more thoughtful ones. They listened more than they spoke, and someone noticed something else. Whenever they were together and topic of relationships, marriage or love came up, whether on television, in church, or among neighbors, his children became unusually quiet, and that silence frightened him because he realized that his children were old enough to sense that their family story had missing pages. They knew Their mother was gone, but they didn't fully know why. They knew they were raised by relatives at some point, but they didn't fully know how. And in that gap of knowledge, assumptions were forming. Samuel understood that if he did not speak now, life will speak for him later, and life is rarely gentle. So one evening, after much prayer and inner struggle, he made a decision to tell them everything. Not half-truths, not softened versions, but the whole truth. He chose a quiet evening when they came visiting. He asked them to sit with him in the sitting room. The way he spoke made them uneasy because they could sense the weight in his voice. "I need to talk to you," he said. They sat. Samuel's hands trembled slightly. This was harder than any labor he had ever done, harder than raising bride price, and harder than watching roots buried. He took a deep breath. "I have not been completely honest with you about your mother," he began. Their faces changed instantly. "What I'm about to tell you may hurt," he continued, "but I don't want you to grow up with lies, and I don't want you to repeat my mistakes because I was too afraid to speak." There was a long pause. Then he began. He told them how he met their mother in the university, how they fell in love quickly, how love felt powerful, exciting, and convincing, how they believed feelings alone were enough to build a future. He told them how they moved in together while still students, how they lived like husband and wife without becoming one. As he spoke, his voice cracked. "We were cohabiting," he said plainly. "We were living in sin, even though we didn't want to call it that. We enjoyed the benefits of marriage without the responsibility of marriage." The room was silent. He told them how the mother used her hostel rent money to cook for him, how she sacrificed, how he accepted it without thinking deeply, how they graduated and continued the same life, ignoring the warnings that came through discomfort, poverty, and delay. Then he spoke about their births. "You were born into love," he said quickly, his eyes filling with tears, "but not into order." That sentence broke something in the room. He told them how the mother begged him to go and meet her parents, how she wanted things done properly, how pride made him delay, how anger entered the home when money became scarce, how arguments turned violent, and how hunger and frustration destroyed peace. By now, tears were flowing freely, his and theirs. Then came the hardest part. He told them about the pregnancy that ended the mother's life, about the breech labor, about the hospital bills he could not pay, about watching the woman he loved die slowly because he had no money and no covering. His children cried openly now. He told them about the threats from the mother's people, the demand that he must marry her before burial, the least he couldn't afford, the years her body remained unburied, the humiliation, the frustration, and the pain. "I married your mother when she was no longer alive," he said quietly. "That is a truth I have carried alone for years." It felt like reopening an old wound that never fully healed. Everyone cried, loudly and uncontrollably. The pain that had been buried under silence finally had a voice. The children cried for the mother they barely knew. Samuel cried for the woman he failed to honor in time, and the past sat among them like a ghost that had finally been acknowledged. After a long while, when tears had softened into quiet sobs, Samuel spoke again. "I am telling you this not to destroy you. I am simply telling you this so you don't end up destroying yourselves." He looked at them firmly now, not as broken children, but as young adults standing at the edge of their own choices. "Never repeat my path," he warned. "Never confuse love with recklessness. Never you think that living together is preparation for marriage. It is not. It is risky. He explained how cohabitation made him careless, how it delayed responsibility, how it exposed the mother to danger without protection. He explained that sin often feels good first but collects payments later with interest. Your mother paid with her life, he said, his voice shaking. I paid with lifelong trauma, and sadly, we made you pay with a broken childhood. That truth landed heavily. But you, he continued, you do not have to pay again. He told them to respect order, to wait when necessary, to choose structure over pressure, to walk away from relationships that demand compromise of values, and to understand that peace is not accidental. It is built by correct decisions. That conversation changed everything in his children. It did not make them perfect, but it made them conscious. From that day, the view of relationships shifted. They became thoughtful, cautious, and intentional. That night, after everyone went to bed, Samuel sat alone and cried again. This time he was crying from relief. He had finally manned up, and in telling the truth, he had broken a circle. Hey, African Tales by Camel Tribe, how are you all doing? For me, I am doing just fine. I hope you learned one or two things from this story as much as I did. Before I leave today, kindly permit me to say this. Sadly, what has been discussed in this story is a fever in today's world because the society has accepted it. But acceptance doesn't make it right. Sin generally is not just about breaking religious rules. It is about stepping out of order. And when life is out of order, confusion enters. Respect reduces. Anger increases. Violence becomes easier. And love turns to resentment. And when tragedy strikes, there won't be any shelter. There is peace in doing things right. Peace in patience. Peace in waiting. Peace in saying not yet instead of manage it. Peace in aligning with wisdom, culture, conscience, and God. Do not rush into enjoyment and postpone responsibility. Do not trade your future for temporal comfort. Do not wait for regrets to teach you lessons wisdom is offered freely today. This story is a mirror. If you see yourself in it, even slightly, I beg you in the name of God to pause, reflect, and adjust. There is no need for you to cohabit with someone who hasn't paid your bride price. Come on, it doesn't make sense. Choose the right path. Choose structure over pressure. Choose honor over convenience, and choose peace over pleasure, because some lessons are too expensive to learn by experience. May God keep helping all of us. In Jesus' name, amen. Don't forget to give the story a thumbs up, share out to your loved ones, and share your thoughts with me in the comment section about what you think about the story. If you have any experience to share with us, feel free to drop it as well, as I would love to read from you. If you have not subscribed to this channel, what are you waiting for? Punch the subscribe button so that you can join the Camel Tribe. Until I bring the next interesting story your way, it's a goodbye from here, and God bless you.